of his cabinet, in which it was acknowledged that I was improperly sentenced, overly, sentenced, and that, but in spite of that, it was felt that I was too valuable a diplomatic bargaining card, to be released at that time.
But was that the time where they told you to pack your bags? Didn't you start giving away your belongings? It was reported in the press.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I realized something was happening. And so what happened at that point, the next day when the protocol was given to Prime Minister Netanyahu, he said, "Where is Pollard?" There was supposed to be a side note. And Clinton said, no. So there was a struggle at the time because Bibi didn't want to sign the protocol because he felt, rightly so, that he had been stabbed in the back and betrayed and lied to by Clinton. And what happened was there were several Israeli members of the delegation who threatened him that if he didn't sign the document, they would speak out against him when they returned home. And so he signed without me. And then there was this whole story about George Tenet, the then head of the CIA, threatening to resign if I were released. And he later admitted that he never said such a thing. It was just a convenient excuse for Clinton to do what Clinton did, which was to just betray people at every turn.
Now, before I get to the beginning, and I want to find out how you got involved in spying for Israel, but do you feel along the whole way that anti-Semitism was playing a major role against you from the get-go?
Yes. Look, the former chairman of the admitted publicly was intended to intimidate the Jewish community and to remind them that they had one loyalty, political loyalty, and that was to the United States, and that if they confused that fact with some other country, their fate would be the same as mine. So, I mean, it was publicly known. One of the documents that I was presented with was a list of Jewish leaders that I was to incriminate in my activities.
Because they always said there was somebody, but they always said throughout that you had a partner that you were doing this with, right? Wasn't that the constant refrain?
Well, that was in another direction. That was on another topic. But no, they were dissatisfied with the fact and frustrated that all of my polygraphs indicated that there was no other person associated with my activity, Mr. X, as he was known. But the list of Jewish leaders that I was presented with was pretty frightening. And they did, well, let's just put it this way. I have 100% disability right now in Israel from my interrogation on that subject.
When you say what did they do to you when they interrogated you?
Quite a bit.
Are you able to elaborate?
I'd rather not at this point. I have trouble walking right now. There are a number of problems that I suffered from still to this day. And it was all over my refusal to implicate people who were completely innocent. I knew when I saw the list what their intentions were. Their intentions, simply put, were to decapitate, if you will, the upper echelon of the American Jewish leadership. And I wasn't raised to be Moser, another Jew.
Can you tell us who are some of the names that they put in front of you?
Name was
that's ADL. Who else?
Top of the line, top of the list. Yeah, from the ADL. I can't get into the rest of it. It's public what happened with him, so I can discuss this. But needless to say, it was pretty much a who's who of Jewish leadership in the United States, from right to left. It wasn't a partisan issue. It was anybody and everybody they could think who was speaking out or acting effectively on behalf of Israel. So I just, several months ago, I met Mr. Foxman, and we had a discussion about that incident with his name being on the list publicly, I might add. And he was a very gracious man, and acknowledged my story, basically because it was something he was told by people in the Senate. And people have asked me why it was that I suffered physical hardship in defense of people who were at the time calling for my head in the Jewish community. And I said quite plainly to them over the years, sometimes an individual has to literally sacrifice himself for the good of the community. I did that for Israel, and I ended up doing that for the American Jewish community as well. No one to this day from that community, by the way, from the leadership, has ever asked for a full investigation. And I don't believe they ever will. Because if they did do that, it would really uncover
some of the leaders that.
Pardon?
What I started to ask you was, were any of the leaders that you were asked to say were part of a conspiracy to spy with you for Israel, have you had any conversations with them about it?
Oh, yes.
When I was
in, and they didn't want to hear about it.
They didn't believe it? They didn't want to hear about it.
They didn't deny what I was saying, but they just didn't want to hear about it. It was old news. Water under the bridge, as it was described by one leader, a Jewish leader. And so there you have it.
Wow. Do you feel betrayed by the Jewish leadership?
In a word, yes, of course. The only thing that I had asked for over the years was a sentence that was proportional to my crime. That's all. I didn't ask for a pardon because I don't believe I deserved one. I broke the law. I deserved to be punished. I just was asking for a proportional sentence. And it took 30 years for people to finally come around. Look, there was a lot of disinformation that was thrown out at the time by the government and the Israeli government, by the American government and the Israeli government, as to my character, the exact nature of my operation, the information.
You gave information to China, for example.
Yeah, it was crazy. Look, as part of my job in the Navy, I was a liaison officer with other countries. And so they seized on that to make a story out of whole cloth that I had somehow either given or tried to sell information to other countries. I took polygraphs on all of that, and I passed all of them. And the fact that I wasn't sentenced or indicted, if you will, for having done that should tell people point blank, it was something. They were throwing everything they humanly could at me in the public, especially to smear me. And by smearing me, you smeared my cause as well. And that's what they hope to do. So I try to tell people, what you have to do is look at my sentence, or my indictment rather. And if you read the indictment, it says very clearly in black and white that I had no intent to harm the United States, in black and white. And I go on to tell people, look, there's some information which, if compromised to anybody, the closest of allies, could do irreparable damage to the national security. And so a person like me who had done something like that should have been indicted for knowingly intending to harm the United States. Well, I wasn't. So you don't need to see the classified material to know that what the government was alleging in terms of monstrous damage, huge damage to the national security, was, in a word, a lie. Many years later, Zev, many years later, Edward Black, the noted Jewish historian, interviewed Caspar Weinberger on the occasion of his memoirs being published. And Ed asked him, why wasn't Pollard mentioned in your memoirs at all? And Weinberger answered, well, because it was a minor matter made more important than it was. Okay, and it was in the New York Times, and nobody picked up on that at all, even though we disseminated the story, we provided the story to everyone we could think of, but no one in the Jewish community at all agreed to, in the leadership echelon, was willing to do anything with that incredible admission. Basically, what he admitted was that the affidavit sworn affidavit that he submitted to the judge and my sentencing judge was perjured testimony. He lied.
He said it was perjured testimony. He said he lied.
No, that's the only conclusion you can reach, because if you look at what he said in the submission to the court, sworn affidavit to the court, and what he later admitted 20 years later, it's clear that he perjured himself. Look, we know the actual guy that wrote the affidavit. It was a colleague of mine. And he admitted to a congressman on the record that, yeah, they lied. They lied, point blank.
And what was the reason why they lied, in your opinion?
Well, it wasn't just my opinion. It was the only conclusion you could reach, that a reasonable person could reach. And that was, they wanted to basically redefine the relationship between Israel and the United States as something less than a genuine alliance. The intent by all, I mean, if you look at the questioning that I was put through, the whole thrust of it was to turn Israel into a country that would not be considered a reliable ally. And the irony of the whole thing was that I was eventually exposed by a CIA agent who was on the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. So
when you say exposed, he's the one that brought to light what your activities were?
Yeah, it was a CIA spy. And we found out about this because he subsequently took the CIA to court in New York City for an inadequate retirement. And in his complaint, he listed the things that he did for the CIA, and one of them was my exposure.
Wow. Can you name his name?
I would rather not. It's a matter of, I don't want to get, I mean, it's a matter of record, but I think my lawyers would prefer me not to mention him.
Are you still bound by certain restrictions?
Yeah, and I just have to be careful in terms of where I go with my speaking. But the irony of this was, a couple of years before, when I met my Israeli team in Paris, Rafi Eitan, my control officer, asked me for the names of all the American spies that were in Israel. And I categorically refused to do that. I said that the terms of reference of our operation dealt specifically and exclusively with that information that was supposed to have been given to Israel under the terms of the U.S.-Israel Intelligence Sharing Agreement. And I wasn't going to violate those terms of reference. And he looked at me rather snidely and said, well, all right, you can do this if you want, but one of them is going to kill you. And okay, he was right. But luckily, I never did it. And so they couldn't accuse me of having compromised American agents. That could have led to a death penalty.
Which they never incurred the death penalty for a spy in, right? Have they in the United States history? since
No,
World War II?
no. I mean, there's a reason why they don't. Of course, there's Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. We shouldn't, forget that.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, they don't want their own spies for example, in the old Soviet Union, killed or executed. Although most of them were. That is the Russian spies that were working for the CIA. And this is another aspect of the case that a lot of people don't know about. They actually thought that I was responsible for the then ongoing destruction of the CIA spy network in the Soviet Union. One of the prosecutors came to me many years later and asked me if I was kind of amazed at the amount of security that was in the courtroom at my sentencing. And I said, yeah, it seemed a little heavy. And he said, well, that was because there were a fair number of CIA field operatives that had volunteered to come in and kill me in the courtroom. And I looked at him and I said, why? And he said, well, a few hours before your sentencing, Aldrich Ames went in ex parte, it was illegal, and told the judge that I was responsible for all of the deaths of American agents in Russia that basically he was committing.
And did you know him? Did you know him?
No, I didn't know him. And we later found out Senator Dennis DeConcini later interrogated or interviewed him, where he admitted that he was ordered to use me as misdirection.
Who ordered him?
The KGB.
So the KGB wanted to put the blame on you to deflect from
Israel, to protect him. It's tradecraft. It was fairly successful for a number of years. And there were more than enough people in the intelligence community that were satisfied with pinning the blame on an Israeli spy. The theory was that the information that I collected fell into the hands of a Russian or Soviet spy in Israel, who was conveniently exposed by the Soviet Union and arrested by Israel. And the Israelis immediately said, this guy didn't know anything. He was a low-level nothing, but he was a spy. And that was enough to close the circle, so to speak, for the American intelligence community. So I guess, when it finally came out that I never had clearances to know these agents, and that there was no actual evidence of me having committed this crime, Senator DeConcini wrote a letter, as the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, wrote a letter to President Clinton saying, you got the wrong guy. Let him go. We have the admission of Ames that he used him. And Clinton basically said he's just too valuable as a bargaining chip. Look, at one point in my sentencing, the judge asked me if I had any regret or remorse for all the people I'd killed. And the ex-prosecutor who came to see me said, what did you say? And I said, yes, I had remorse. I'm sorry there wasn't one more.
You said that?
Said,
wow.
Yeah. And he said, where was your head? Where was your mind when you said that? And I said, Tunis, October 1985, Operation Wooden Leg. This is the effort by Israel to assassinate Yasser Arafat for a horrendous terrorist attack that had occurred in Larnaca, Cyprus. It was, I hesitate to describe the details of it on public radio. It was very bad. And finally, the Israelis had just had enough of this. And so I was
So what happened? So was this really plan to kill Arafat, and what were you asked to do?
I was, at the time, there was a conflict, a diplomatic, and it looked like it was going to become military, a conflict between Libya and Tunisia and Algeria. So there were a lot of international warships in the Gulf of Hammamet. monitoring the situation. And my job basically was to help the Israeli Air Force thread the needle, so to speak, through this hodgepodge of international warships. And then they needed information, ground information on Arafat's movements and locations and timing of when he would be coming to his headquarters in Tunis. And what happened was he deviated from his routine that day, and he stopped to review his honor guard. And as he was stopped, the F-15s passed, Israeli F-15s passed right over his head and utterly demolished his headquarters. So that's where my head was in Tunis. I was sorry.
But they failed to get Yasser Arafat.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I looked at the ex-prosecutor and I said, like, so what? Because my lawyers immediately said that, you know, President Reagan had issued a statement thanking the unknown Israeli intelligence officer who had actually facilitated the strike. And my lawyer pointed me rather melodramatically and said, here's the guy that the president was praising. And the ex-prosecutor said, well, that's not where the judge's mind was. The judge's mind was in the basement of the Lefortovo prison in Moscow, where Aldrich Ames had described in excruciating detail how one of the American spies, General Igor Tretyakov, aka Tricycle, had been fed feet first alive in front of his family into a furnace. So here he said, there you were saying, you know, without explaining it, you were sorry that there wasn't one more. And the judge interpreted that as one more American agent.
And you were referring to one more being Yasser Arafat.
Meaning Yasser Arafat.
But let me ask you a question before we break. You mentioned that you were helping Israel target Yasser Arafat. I was under the impression that Israel had many occasions where they could have killed him, but they didn't for some reason. In fact, they saved his life on one occasion.
Yes, that's true.
So
this incident in Larnaca was so egregious that, and it was done by his personal bodyguard force, the Force 17. It wasn't like Black September or some other organization that would deflect attention from his culpability. It was his own protective force that committed this atrocity in Larnaca. And it was just too much at that point. And the feeling was, it's time to get him.
But afterwards, they didn't try again to kill him because there were, I don't remember the time when they saved his life. There was a period of time they saved his life where a plane went down. They had other occasions. Right. So in context, this was before or after those incidents?
This was before.
So why did they want to kill him with your assistance at one point, and another point they let him go and saved his life?
You'd have to ask the decision makers in the Israeli government of the day and the intelligence officials who made these calls. I didn't make these calls. I wasn't privy to the exact discussions that led to the decision to target him at that time with me. But I think just the egregiousness of the crime and the fact that his group, his personal bodyguard, was involved in this massacre of Israeli civilians in Larnaca tipped the scales at the time. And and it could have been done without collateral damage, because he would have been in that headquarters when the roof came down. And it wasn't like in the middle of Tunis or in the middle of another built-up area with lots of civilians.
You think he was tipped off, or why that's why he wasn't in the building?
That's always a possibility. I mean, it's nothing that should be discounted. It's possible that he was tipped off, and that that would have, whoever tipped him off would have come from someone inside Israeli intelligence to the Americans. And that happened a lot then, and it's happening a lot now, in fact, with American leaks of sensitive information concerning impending Israeli operations either to stop them or to compromise them or to cause casualties in our attacking forces. So it's an interesting story, but there is a look. I don't want to put a probability on it, but there is always a possibility that there was a leak from someone in Israel. As I said, the CIA had somebody in the Knesset and Foreign Affairs Committee, and who knows who else they had within the Israeli intelligence and military establishments. There's just no telling at this point. So you're right, possible. It's possible he was tipped off.
Our guest is former Naval Intelligence Officer Jonathan Pollard, served 30 years for spying for Israel. We're speaking to him in Israel. When we come back, we'll take some of your phone calls. 212-769-1925. 212-769-1925. Email is a wonderful way to have some of your questions answered. Zev@talklinenetwork.com. Zev@talklinenetwork.com. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. Stay tuned.
Mike Lindell here, and like you, I see our country being destroyed daily. We face massive economic issues, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, there are people in power who threaten the values that have made our country great. I've been a believer in gold and silver for a long time, and I've searched for years for a partner that shares my values. Well, Genesis Gold Group showed me how easy it is to protect your IRA, 401k, or your retirement with gold and silver. Their faith-driven approach to service and stewardship is one that stands out from the rest.
Call now for your free gold IRA investing guide. 800-965-1298. 800-965-1298. 800-965-1298. That's 800-965-1298.
The Jewish Connection is a newspaper that comes out twice a month, serving the 5 towns, Great Neck, Queens and Long Island, Brooklyn, Northern New Jersey, and Staten Island. It's also available online at www.jewishc.com. The Jewish Connection keeps you connected with the latest news, including full coverage of local communities, as well as events from Israel and all around the world, with special features for the whole family and games from children.
The preceding program is a paid advertisement. The opinions and views expressed therein do not necessarily reflect those of AM 620 WSNR or its management.
This is AM 620 WSNR, Jersey City.
Special features for the whole family and games for the children. The best part is that the Jewish Connection is free and available at local synagogues and Jewish stores. If you don't receive it, please call 718-761-2626 for delivery to your shul or store. They can also email it to you. To advertise in the Jewish Connection's paper edition or online, call 718-761-2626. Again, that's 718-761-2626.
Hey, this is Alan Dershowitz. One of the most important Jewish institutions in the world today is Talkline with Zev Brenner. He is so smart and he is so innovative and he has so many interesting guests. I don't know what Yiddishkeit, I don't know what New York, I don't know what the world would do without Zev. So Zev, Yasher Koach, may you go from strength to strength and keep informing us and educating us and keep fighting for Jewish values.
Are you interested in hosting your own radio show and podcast, or perhaps a TV program? Talkline Network can help you get on the air from 1 hour weekly to 24 hours a day. Ideal for ethnic, foreign language, medical, business, and religious broadcasting. We also have full-time radio stations for lease, as well as FM HD channels. For more information, please call 212-769-1925. That's 212-769-1925. Or email zevbrenner@gmail.com.
Tired of driving the same old clunker? Dreaming of a brand new ride, but worried your credit score won't cooperate? Stuck in a lease you don't want? Don't throw in the towel just yet. At Linden Car Leasing, we understand life throws curveballs. We specialize in helping folks like you cruise off in style, regardless of credit history. That's right. At Linden, we work hard to find the perfect car for you, whether it's a sleek Chevrolet powered by legendary Dresner engines or any other make and model your heart desires. Wait, we can even help you if you have a complicated lease from another company. Consider it our specialty. We'll navigate the paperwork jungle and get you into a new lease you'll love. Linden Car Leasing offers fantastic deals on all makes and models, with service so good it'll make you want to sing. Don't wait. Call Linden Car Leasing today and get ready to drive off into the sunset in your dream car. Call 908-223-5209. That's 908-223-5209. Online at lindencarleasing.com. That's Linden Car Leasing, where getting a great deal is always a smooth ride.
Thank you for listening to this episode of
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, on the air since 1981. Please call us with your questions and comments at 212-769-1925. That's 212-769-1925. Or email us at zevbrenner@gmail.com.
Thank you for.
And we're back. Jonathan Pollard with us. He was convicted in 1985 of selling secrets to Israel. Served 30 years in prison. And we're looking at some of the circumstances involving that. We'll get to some current situations soon. Get to some of your questions in just a few moments.
Could I correct one quick thing?
Sure.
If I could.
Go right ahead.
I wasn't actually convicted of selling information to Israel. That was never mentioned in my indictment or in my sentence. The word used was provided. Again, a lot of misinformation went out.
Can you address it? So they said you took money for the work that you did.
Yeah, well, I was a professional intelligence officer. The first half of my operation, I provided information as a volunteer. And there came a point in time where I crossed the line officially and became an Israeli salary. I paid taxes. I paid, health insurance, just like any other Israeli citizen. And it was expected that my operation would come to an end within about a year, which it did, and that I would then resign from Navy intelligence and then move on to Europe, where I would do other things for them. So the issue of money was a very effective one for the government. They tried to make the case that I was a mercenary, but the funny thing about the judge, who really didn't like me at all, and told my lawyer ex parte once again that he basically wanted to send a message to the Jewish community through me, that he had two choices. He could either give me a lesser sentence, assuming I was a mercenary, and fine me, or he could give me the maximum sentence with no fine, based on his conclusion that I was an ideologue and a bona fide agent. And he chose the latter. And this is why a lot of people thought I was a little mental when I actually thanked the judge. It would have been horrible for me to have been condemned as a mercenary. Even the judge understood that had money been my primary motive, I could have made a lot of money selling secrets to the Saudis, for example, on Israel. They were willing at the time to pay almost anything for very good information on Israeli military capabilities. So it was something that the government seized upon and manipulated without answering, the fact that American spies operating overseas, in many cases, are doing so under cover of a legitimate business that they receive a salary from, as well as their regular government salary. So again, it was just something that the government used rather effectively, I might add, to confuse people as to what my ideological motives were in this operation.
So I want to go to the beginning. You grew up in Indianapolis. What motivated you? And there's a new documentary that came out about you. I don't know if you saw that recently. They didn't interview you in the documentary. I don't know if you saw it, but they said that from your very young age, you were telling people you want to spy for Israel.
Well, that documentary, first of all, I was born in Galveston, Texas. So I'm a Texan. No, that documentary was done by a
Who did the documentary?
Correspondent in Israel. If you look, you're in the media, so you understand viewership. And if you look at the viewership ratings that he had on the first night, it was very high. On the second night, it crashed. And on the third night, hardly anybody watched it, simply because it was, well, incredible. It wasn't a credible piece at all. I had nothing to do with it. I knew who this guy was. And what happened was, the week it was supposed to air, my wife died, Esther, Aleh Shalom, died. And there were many people in the government that called him and asked him to delay the show until after the Shiva period. And he refused, and his excuse was, more people will watch it if they know he's sitting Shiva.
Wow.
This is the guy we're talking about now. And I didn't know. I actually watched the first episode, and at points I didn't know who he was talking about. You know, I called friends of mine, lawyers, you know, everybody that was watching it, and said, "Who is this?" That he said, "Oh, it wasn't you." You know, he made a lot of things up out of whole cloth.
Yeah.
And when people called him, a friend of mine called him, and I have this on tape, and said to him, you know, it's fine that you characterized him at the end as an ideologue, but why did you have to inject all this sensational, unverified information into the story? And his answer was, I'm in the entertainment business as much as I am a journalist. And that's the problem with Israeli journalists right now. They are equally responsible for what happened on October 7th as the military or the political echelon. They're just utterly irresponsible here. And God help you if we took them to court once.
You took who to court?
We in Israel, we took them for defamation. We took
this filmmaker?
No, this was years before. We took a reporter and his paper, which was Haaretz at the time, to court for defamation and slander. And we won. We won 1 shekel. Okay, but it was the principle of the thing. And nobody cared about it because they said, why did you waste the time and effort, you know, suing an Israeli journalist where everybody knows they lie? I mean, that's just the fact of life over here. The media, except for a few...
No, I hear you.
You know, except for a few papers and online websites, you can't believe hardly anything they say. And I had heard about this before I went to Israel, but having come here, where you do an interview with a reporter and you then read about it the next day, and it's not anything you said.
Is it only unique to Israeli report? What about Wolf Blitzer?
Wolf Blitzer. Well, first of all, the reason I interviewed with him to begin with, when he was Jerusalem Post bureau chief in Washington, was because my lawyer at the time had told me that...
Who was your lawyer at the time?
Richard Hybe, Lebanese, by the way. That in an ex parte conversation that he had with my sentencing judge at a judicial conference, which kind of shocked me, the judge admitted to him that he was going to put me away for life as a warning to the American Jewish community. And he confirmed this to my parents and my sister at the time as well. So I said, well, okay, I have maybe one chance to get anything out that I can. So I applied and received permission from pretty much anybody and everybody that was supposed to give me permission to interview. And when Wolf showed up to the interview, there was no government monitor. And the warden of the prison at the time said, well, the government called and just said, go ahead with the interview. I didn't realize that was a setup. And the American prosecutor, Joey DeGeneva, later crowed about the fact that he had set me up. And, he was bragging about it. So I had an interview with Wolf. Okay. The next interview I had with him was under the same circumstances. And this was the interview that eventually got published in the Washington Post
newspaper, right?
Magazine, Weekend Magazine. Oh, shit.
Our guest is Jonathan Pollard. We're speaking to him in Israel, and we're looking at his 30 years where he was incarcerated. Now his freedom in Israel. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah. So what happened at the time was he promised me that the publication would not come out until after my sentencing, for obvious reasons. Well, in the meantime, the government hammered me and said that I had interviewed with him illegally, and I had defied the
It always bothered me. They said illegally. They let him in. They let him go in there. So how could they challenge you for doing illegally when they're in control of the prison? They let him in. I didn't understand that.
A high security prison, no less. They made the charge. It inflamed the judge. Okay, I'll tell you the truth about this now. I've told several people privately, but I'll tell you publicly. I didn't trust my lawyer at the time. And I fed him disinformation about the interview. And the next day, the FBI polygraphed me on those specific questions. And when they realized what I had done, the polygrapher looked at me and said, your lawyer betrayed you, didn't he? I said, yeah. And I said, now I have the evidence to prove it. So when I asked to change my lawyer, the judge refused to let me change my lawyer by saying that he had full faith and confidence in my lawyer and that I should just be quiet and sit down. Well, what happened was Wolf lied to me. And that piece came out a week before I was sentenced and figured rather prominently in my sentencing. It didn't help me at all, obviously.
It would have made any difference because the judge wanted to put you away for life. So would this have made any difference?
It gave him a leg to stand on. It gave him a justification for violating my plea agreement. That was the damage that was done.
So how'd you end up with this lawyer? If he was betraying you, and he certainly was not sympathetic?
What happened was the Israeli government had pretty much secured the assistance of every leading Jewish lawyer in Washington at the time. I didn't have anybody in Washington that I could turn to, and I didn't have any money. And so this,
did the government freeze your money?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And
they
so
expect you to have a defense to freeze your money.
Yeah, they do that, before you're sentenced. They actually, it's a technique to prevent somebody from securing effective representation. So they'll be more amenable to a deal. So what happened at that point when I was arrested, when, my father swung into action. And since he was at Notre Dame, a professor at Notre Dame, a graduate of the law school was recommended. And he had been an assistant attorney general. I mean, he came with a lot of good credibility behind him. And the Israelis paid for him. And he sold me down the river. Plain and simple.
That's Richard Hybe.
Richard Hybe. And we had a case later, an appeal, based on ineffectiveness of counsel. And there really wasn't any argument over what he hadn't done for me. So just to conclude on Wolf, so a year or two later, he came out with a book called Territory of Lies, which it was. He even took the title from me, which was kind of ironic. But based on that book, he got that position with CNN at the Pentagon. And it's my blood that he spilled.
Wow. You know, I
And to this-
came across Wolf Blitzer a couple of years ago, and I asked him about you. He feigned like he almost didn't know who you were. It was a very strange.
He has to do that, because if he actually told the truth about what he did to me, he couldn't show his face in public. He can't show his face here in Israel. They consider him a turncoat, a self-hating Jew, an apologist for the enemy. He doesn't have a very good reputation here at all. And I can speak to the accuracy of that assessment about him. To this day, he has done absolutely nothing to, I would use the word atone, for the massive damage that he did to me. He lied to me. He misrepresented what I told him. The book that he printed, Territory of Lies, has got, well, it's just that. It's a territory of lies. There are a few things in there that are accurate. But Alan Dershowitz, in fact, asked me to write a review of the book. And I used up, legal pads, itemizing all the mistakes he made. And some of the things he just made up out of whole cloth. So my feelings towards Wolf are not what I would call warm and fuzzy.
I can understand. Like when I asked him about you, he looked at me like almost like he didn't know who you were, and I thought that was very bizarre since you wrote a book about you. So I have to find the tape somewhere.
I'm going to let the Kisei Akavod have the last word on that when he finally when he finally goes somewhere, and he'll have to basically justify what he did to me.
Here's an email question. Ask Jonathan if it's true that Leon Charney was supposed to be his lawyer and could have saved him from a long sentence, but he didn't want to hire him.
Okay. I wanted Leon Charney as my lawyer. And when I told you the story just now, where I asked the judge that I wanted to change my lawyer after I had proven that he had betrayed me with the FBI, I suggested that Leon Charney should represent me, and the judge refused.
Why?
The judge, my lawyer, and the prosecutor were all friends. They were golfing buddies. And the judge and the prosecutor had exactly the right lawyer they wanted to represent me, who would sell me down the river. And so they were very concerned about my effort to get Leon to represent me, because they realized that he would represent me zealously and effectively, and they couldn't have that at all. So yes, I did want Leon as a lawyer. I made a formal motion to that effect, and it was the judge who turned me down. And my lawyer at the time, Mr. Hybe, just looked at me and smiled and said, nice try. That's my lawyer. That's my lawyer telling me nice try. So
wasn't Alan and his brother Nathan Dershowitz involved somehow, representing you at some point?
Yes, and they were representing me up until the direct appeal that I had in Washington, that was heard by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, believe it or not, before she went on to the Supreme Court. And there were just there were problems in Washington at the time, which was a Republican administration at the time, and there were just some difficulties with having Alan represent me at the time. Alan is a wonderful lawyer. He's a fantastic asset for both the American Jewish community and for Israel. And I believe that if he had represented me from the start, I never would have gotten a life sentence. That's how much faith I have in his lawyering abilities. But just there were a lot of things going on at the time that I was not aware of by interested parties that purported to speak for me. And as I said, if Alan had represented me originally, I never would have gotten the sentence I did. He would have moved heaven and earth to ensure that I never got the kind of sentence I did.
What were some of the complications that he couldn't represent you? And wasn't his brother Nathan also involved somehow?
Yes. The problem, it was all political in Washington at the time. Look, you have to understand, Zev, that decisions were made for me on many occasions. That was the result of circumstances where people didn't have access to me. When I was put away for over a year in a mental asylum for the criminally insane in Springfield.
How long were you in an insane asylum?
Over a year.
Wow. At
And
what point? This was after you were arrested?
Right after I was sentenced. And Congressman Lee Hamilton of Indiana, a good friend of my father's, was the one who got me out of there. He was appalled that they had put me in there. They kept saying, we'll take you out when you talk. And I wasn't.
When you say talk, they want you to inform on other Jewish leaders and say that
inform on other Jewish leaders and on other Israelis. And the one major problem I had was the fact that I was involved in Iran-Contra. And this was before everybody knew about it. And
when you say involved, could you define what you mean involved in Iran-Contra? What did you do?
What did I do? Well, my boss, Rafi Eitan, had me open up a bank account in Switzerland for various people, Americans. And that was later, what happened with that bank account was it was later twisted into my bank account because I refused to say who I opened the bank accounts for. These were Iran-Contra principles. And I considered these men, Americans, to be patriots. They weren't taking money for personal gain. And I didn't feel that it was appropriate for me to betray them. So I to this day, I have kept my mouth shut about who I opened the accounts for. And even though the bank did admit to the American government that I had no access to that account, I was told I either talk and tell who I opened the accounts up for, or the account would be given to me. And the judges were kind of funny, and they said, "You're going to be a very rich man, Mr. Pollard, for about 5 minutes." So enjoy it. So Rafi Eitan asked me to provide information to him on air defense systems, for example, that could defend Karg Island, that was being hammered at the time by the Iraqis. It was during the Iran-Iraq War, which I did. And the funny thing about this was I was the one that suggested the Hawk missile trade. Old Hawk surface air missiles from Israel would be traded for new Hawks, and the old Hawks would be given to Iran, which is what happened. And I wrote all of this up shortly before I was arrested. And I forgot, under the pressure of time, to change the ribbon in my typewriter. It was a new ribbon. It tells you how long ago that was.
Wow.
And the FBI got the ribbon and reconstructed the letter. And this was long before Iran-Contra was known. So they knew already at that point that there was an illegal act being conducted by the administration at the time. I mean, I wasn't concerned with the illegalities for obvious reasons, because I believed in what they were trying to do. But that document disappeared. Nobody wanted to talk about it. I'm sure it still exists in the FBI archives.
Wow.
But they won't get off it.
I want to just read an email. Could you describe the day that you were arrested at getting into the Israeli embassy? And I want to add a postscript to that. Do you feel betrayed at Israel at that point in time?
Yeah, what happened was the last time I was in Israel, I told my control officer, Rafi Eitan, that the wall, that I felt that the walls were closing in on me, that they were looking for somebody. And he told me the same thing, almost verbatim, that the Israelis told Eli Cohen when he expressed the same fears on his last visit to Israel. And they said to him and they said to me, you have to go back because there is some information that we need. It's critical. And they told me what it was. And I had to make a decision, just like Eli Cohen did, that the information was more valuable to Israel than my life. And Eli Cohen made the same decision. Ironically, my code name was Danny Cohen because Israel had an Eli Cohen in Damascus, and they had a Danny Cohen, me, in Washington. Washington was not considered a safe place to operate as an Israeli spy at all. So when I was arrested, I did what I was told. I eventually confessed to being a Pakistani spy.
A Pakistani spy.
Yeah. And there was a lot of evidence in my apartment to prove that. It was placed. And the deal was that after admitting to being a Pakistani spy, I would be exfiltrated. I would disappear. And the Pakistanis would have the mud left on their face. And I passed the polygraph, by the way. And I did things.
Polygraph as being a Pakistani spy.
Yeah, I had done things under orders to guarantee that I could pass a polygraph. Okay, so I finally made a call, a short call on a safe phone, and said I'm ready for exfiltration. I admitted to what I was doing, and I was told at that point, Rafi Eitan never did anything to prepare for your exfiltration. I said, what? What am I supposed to do then? He said, come to the embassy. And I said, I can't. The whole point of me admitting to being a Pakistani spy was to deflect attention from Israel. Well, orders are orders. So most of the FBI was at the Pakistani embassy. I know I had a tracker on the car. There's a helicopter right overhead. And they didn't know where I was going. There was only one car behind me. And the minute I came to the embassy, the gate opened, I went in, the gate closed, and security staff came out and everything was fine. I was safe until the chief of security came out and said, you have to go outside the embassy and come in the front door. Those are orders.
You went through the front door or the back door when you came in?
I came down the ramp to the parking lot. I never actually entered the embassy itself, but I was on embassy property. So I looked up the hill, and there was, an army of FBI agents waiting with guns drawn. So, I looked at the situation and I just said, look, take my wife in, because I know what they're going to do to me. So just take her in. And she was part of the operation as well, I might add. And he said, no, I'm sorry, those aren't my orders. You have to get in the car and go up. So I already realized at that point that I had been betrayed by someone.
Did you ever find who betrayed you?
No. They know here who did it. And there is some supposition here that he was a Soviet agent.
At the Israeli embassy in Washington?
In Israel. In Israel. Rafi Eitan could not have ordered my expulsion from the embassy. It was somebody very high up. And there was a reason that person who did order the expulsion wanted me caught. That had to do with Aldrich James.
So it's all part of the whole cycle.
Right, to do that. So before I got into the car, the security agent held the door and said, I need your last report. So I gave him my last report and asked him for a favor. I said, would you shoot me? And just say you thought I was a terrorist. Because I knew what they were going to do to me. And I didn't want to go there. So he said, no, I'm sorry, you have to leave.
Wow. He asked for your paper and then he asked you to leave.
Correct. So I drove up the hill and stopped. They stopped me. They got out. They didn't, they weren't rough or anything with me. In fact, in a sense, they were kind of relieved that I was a friendly agent and not a Soviet at that time. And I looked back, and all the blinds of the embassy were closing like an eyelid closing. And there was a song that I remembered at the time that the British actually played at Yorktown when they surrendered to the French and American rebels. It was called "The World Turned Upside Down," and that's how I felt at the time.
Did you feel anger? Did you feel betrayed at Israel? You were still continuing to help. Do you have any regrets at that moment?
No. And it took me many years, and with Esther's help, to realize that I didn't really serve a government or an intelligence organization. I served the land and people of Israel. And they never betrayed me, ever. But having come home, I understood just how rotten and decrepit and corrupt the Israeli political establishment and the military especially actually are. It came as a great disappointment and shock to me. And this is why I'm seriously considering entering politics.
Are you going to run for Knesset?
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked by a number of parties, and the polling indicates that I could be of help to one or more of them. So,
would that be Likud?
No, absolutely not. I think anybody that votes for Likud at this point has to have their head examined.
Which parties would you
support? Right now, I'm looking more to Itamar Ben-Gvir or Bezalel Smotrich on the right. They're the only ones that, haven't betrayed this country. They have not betrayed this country at all. You can say a lot of things about Itamar, and you can say, a lot of things about Bezalel, but the one thing you can't say about either one of them is they are not corrupt, and they have not sold this country out at all. You can disagree with their politics, you can disagree with their method of communicating to the public, but unlike most of the other politicians in the Knesset, their parties, their MKs have not betrayed Israel at all. They have not sold out.
Our guest is former spy for Israel, Jonathan Pollard, served 30 years in prison, currently living in the Holy Land. We're going to be right back. We're going to get to some of your email questions, zev@talklinenetwork.com, zev@talklinenetwork.com. We'll try to squeeze in a couple of phone calls. 212-769-1925, 212-769-1925.
Hi, this is Dove Tusman. Tune in each Thursday night here on Talkline Network to my show, Equal Footing, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. It's live call-in radio. We tackle controversial subjects with an open mind but a critical eye, from mental health issues to relationship problems to politics. Tune in each Thursday night, Equal Footing, with me, Dove Tusman, here on the Talkline Network.
Are you feeling lost in the maze of Medicare? Are all those ads that you see and hear confusing? I'm Medicare Menachem Friedman, and I can help you make the right choice. Over 15 years ago, I helped my grandparents navigate the complex world of Medicare. They were confused, but I brought them clarity, and I can do the same for you. I host countless Medicare educational events, breaking down the ABCs and Ds of Medicare. No jargon, just plain talk. Wondering when to enroll? I can advise you at the proper time to enroll at the right moment so you can avoid penalties and make informed choices. If you're confused about Medicare supplement plans with Part D RX versus Medicare Advantage, I will help you weigh those options. I don't work for Medicare, but work for you and change your plan. Fear shouldn't drive your choices. I will empower you to make clear and concise decisions. Say goodbye to that Medicare anxiety. I'll help you find the plan that fits your unique situation. From New York to Florida to California, I'm licensed in over 25 states. Please connect with me, Medicare Menachem Friedman, today. Call 347-738-6846. That's 347-738-6846, or you can find me on the web at mindfulmedicaresolutions.com, because your Medicare journey deserves a trusted companion.
Are you interested in selling radio or TV time? Talkline Communications Network is looking for go-getters who are independent and interested in earning high commissions. If you are a good communicator, have excellent people skills, and have sales experience, this could be a wonderful opportunity for you. Ideal for students or housewives and can be part or full-time. For more information, please call 212-769-1925. That's 212-769-1925. Or you can email info@talklinecommunications.com.
Please welcome the 110th mayor of the great city of New York, Mayor Eric Adams.
One of my favorite radio shows. Always good speaking with you, Zev. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back. Let's squeeze in a phone call, get a bunch of emails for you as well. Let's go to George in Manhattan. Your question for Jonathan Pollard.
Yes, Mr. Pollard, I have a quick question for you. How do you feel about the student demonstrations that are taking place in America right now? I'll hang up and listen.
Okay, thank you.
I think they're a warning sign to the American Jewish community that it's time to leave. I'm involved extensively here with Aliyah efforts. I just got back from France, in fact, where the situation is horrendous. When I look at these demonstrations, what I see is the net result of decades of propaganda and indoctrination by Qatar in particular, and the radical left here in the United States. Our enemies, the enemies not just of the Jewish people, but of the United States as well, have taken over academia. And what you're looking at right now, it may be true that many, not most, but many of those participating in these demonstrations are professional agitators. That may be. But if you look
They
at
are
the
40% of them in Manhattan are not students, since they come with hammers and other apparatus to do damage. These are agitators, troublemakers.
And when you look at it's not their existence that bothers me. It's the lack of a proper response, both by the universities and the federal government, that troubles me. Anti-Semitism has gone mainstream right now in the United States, just as it did in Europe many years ago. And it's mostly by the same people. It's the radical left. It's the red-green alliance. It's the radical left and the Islamists that have gotten together to wage war against the Jewish people.
Against the Jewish people. Let me read another question. Joseph. It's not. Okay. In the only interest of time, I'm just trying to speed things up a little bit. Joseph Rice said, Mr. Pollard, publish a book, or is he going to publish one?
Never. I've been advised
you don't want to write
it would be damaging to my health. Let's put it that way. So I'm looking to the future. I have businesses now that I'm running, startups, and I have a new family. Esther, alayhi shalom, did the shidduch with my current wife, Rivka. Great. I mean, look what she did. She saved me from prison and she saved me from memory. So I have a family. Rivka has 6 girls and 1 boy. And to those of you that have daughters, I have 6 of them. And what little hair I have, I'm scared to death of them. So no, I'm not going to write a book. I want to leave a better legacy than the one I have right now, and so I'm working very, very hard on projects that will benefit Israel.
Here's Mark Wright. Please ask Mr. Pollard how he reacts to people speculating that he's been identity similar to Mashiach ben Yosef. There's a lot of talk out there with people feeling he's very qualified. Would love to hear how he feels about it.
I'm a very simple person. I'm not. I mean, the fact that I was born on Tisha B'Av also gets people all wrapped up about this. But I'm just an ordinary man that got caught up in an extraordinary situation, and I tried to do my best by my people and my country, and I'm a taxpayer now in Israel, and but I will not be quiet as far as what I see in terms of changes that need to be done here to make this country more Jewish, more aligned with Torah principles, and more victorious on the battlefield.
Let's go to Moshe Flappers. Your question for Jonathan. Go ahead.
I wonder if I could get a bracha from you.
What?
A bracha. I only give one bracha because I know it works. So here it goes.
I feel like I want to get a bracha from a person that it's amazing how you survived all this Gehenna,
I survived 30 years by Yirat Shamayim and the love of a good woman. That's how it. So let me give you a bracha. Let me give you a bracha. Yevarechecha Adonai mitzion, u'rebetu Yerushalayim kol yemei chayecha u'evanim levanecha shalom al Israel.
And Hashem, you should be healthy and you should live many more years.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
BC writes, would Jonathan please give the listeners some words of chizuk during these trying times we're living through? Thank you.
As I indicated just now, I survived 30 years, including 7 years, 150 meters underground in a 3 square meter cell.
Was that solitary confinement?
Yeah. Because
how long were you in solitary for, did you say?
7 years. 7 years.
So how long were you in solitary? 7 years. Wow. And the
7
lawyers,
years.
nobody can do anything about it.
No. When they opened up the door and let me out, I asked 2 questions. What year is it? And are my parents still alive? But as far as chizuk is concerned, you have to understand that the Geula Shlema will come. It will come. But it will come either with a shmais or a kiss, depending on our actions. The most important thing we can do is to hold on to the notion of achdut, of unity right now. And those who seek to divide us, and those who seek to undermine our faith in Hashem and our ownership of the land, this is the Erev Rav, and we have to be aware of this. And we will have to live by our faith and by the notion of Yirat Shamayim. You mustn't fear anybody or anything except Hashem, except God. And if you do that, you'll see how I survived 30 years in hell. My wife Esther taught me about Yirat Shamayim. And it was one of the most tremendous things she could have given me apart from her love.
Now, you became were you religious when they began this whole process of spying for Israel?
I was brought up in a traditional household, typical Jewish kind of conservadox environment, where we drove to shul on Saturday and parked around the corner with everybody else and, walked to shul at that point. I was really kind of off the derech at the time. And when I landed in solitary confinement and told there are 2 ways of leaving, you can kill yourself or you can talk, I sat down and I had a heart-to-heart talk with Hashem. And I just said, I can't do this by myself. I need your help. So I negotiated like Avram Avinu for Sodom and Gomorrah. I said to Hashem, look, if I promise to follow these 5 rules, of halacha, and I stopped doing these 5 things, which are not good for a Jew to do. Save me. And he did. He saved me. And he saved me for 23 years of hell in a killing field in prison. He saved me from that.
Did you counter anti-Semitism from the guards or from other inmates?
Believe it or not, no. And it was mostly because I didn't talk. They're prisoners, if you don't talk, you're kind of regarded as someone safe. Believe it or not, the confusion over a visit from my Rav, Kavod Harav Mordechai Eliyahu, Sefer Tzadik L'Kodesh Livracha, saved me also. There were a lot of Muslims on the compound. And people confused him because he came in dressed as the Rishon LeZion. So they'd never seen a Jew before, most of these guys. So they thought he was a sheikh from Saudi Arabia. And the imam of the prison told me not to correct the record. So at one time, I wore a kufi because, I didn't have a kippah at the time. So it was incredible that I had all these Muslim guys coming to me asking for my interpretation of the hadith. And I was just giving them straight Talmud. So, I just thought, well, okay, this was my way of undermining their faith. But there are a lot of Muslim guys, I think, floating around out there with a misunderstanding of what the hadith and the Quran are. But as far as the bottom line on this is that Hashem saved me. That's the only way I can explain
And how often did Rabbi Eliyahu visit you in prison?
As often as he could. Every time he came to the United States, he visited me. But there was one rabbi in particular who should have been my brother. This is Rabbi Pesach Lerner. He did things for me and for Esther that were just unbelievable. I don't think we would have made it without him. And he is an absolute asset in every sense of the word for the Jewish community. And so he came very often. The Rav came as often as he could. And so these are the 2 people that figured prominently in making me survive, in allowing me to survive this terrible ordeal.
Here's another email question for you. Remember efforts going back decades to free Jonathan Pollard, and I wanted to ask Jonathan if Seymour Reich was the first Jewish establishment figure to advocate for his release and the injustice done to him. I also want to know if any congressman helped Jonathan.
Seymour was very helpful, and I definitely appreciate everything that he did for me. He didn't get anything out of it, quite the opposite. And so I think his efforts on my behalf should be recognized. As far as congressmen, yeah, there were a number of congressmen who helped. I don't want to start naming them because I'm afraid I'm going to leave one out. But there's one that I know will be very controversial, but I think the truth demands that I acknowledge him, and that's Tony Weiner.
Oh, Anthony Weiner. Okay.
Tony did things on principle that no one else would do. No one.
For example?
Well, I can't quite get into it, but he was the go-to guy for us on Capitol Hill. Whatever we needed, whoever we needed to speak to, he helped us with an open hand, and as I said, there were other congressmen and senators who helped, but I'm afraid to start listing them out of fear of leaving one of them out. But
can I ask you about Jerry Nadler?
Jerry Nadler was fantastic. The guy never backs down at all, ever. And again, at the risk of leaving other people out, since you mentioned him, I have to express my profound thanks and gratitude for everything he tried to do for me down through the years. He was a man of principle with me, and I think his motivation to help me was as much to help the United States criminal justice system correct an injustice as it was to help a fellow Jew. So Jerry Nadler should, I mean, he's going to go down as one of, along with Anthony Weiner, as two of the most important congressmen who tried to help me.
Are you able to travel to the United States at this point in time?
I would be a crazy person if I did. There is some feeling that there's a unsealed indictment waiting for me. They're not finished with me.
Why? They feel you still have secrets that you can impart?
No,
Is that what...
I never talked about certain things, and they're very angry about that. They're very angry. And so, no, I have no interest in returning to the United States at all. At all.
But you feel that they still have unfinished business? If you came back, they would look to go after you again?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look,
here's another email question. Go ahead. You're home in Israel.
Yeah, I'm home. And I don't have any need to go to the United States right now. I'm home. Right now, I'm trying to get American Jews to come here before it's too late. So I have no interest in going.
On the last mission, here's an email. On the last mission that you were asked to conduct for Israel, what was it about?
Well, I can't quite say what it was about, but it had to do with an issue of war and peace. That there was some equipment that was en route, people thought, to a country very close to Israel, and we could not allow that equipment to land without destroying it, and that certainly would have led to a war. And luckily, the equipment went somewhere else, and that was the information that I was sent back to ascertain where the equipment was actually going.
Wow. An incredible story, what you went through over the course of time. Your faith is still strong. Did you meet with the Bibi Netanyahu when you got back to Israel? Did you have a conversation with him?
Yeah, a couple of times. I thanked him very much.
So you felt he did try to help you get out of prison, correct?
There were two prime ministers, only two prime ministers that tried to help me. He was one, and the other one, you'll be surprised, was Yitzhak Rabin. He actually got a deal on the occasion of the Israel-Jordan peace agreement in Washington. He secured the agreement of Bill Clinton to release me and let me go home. And then, of course, he was assassinated. And when his immediate successor, Shimon Peres, tried to get Clinton to act on that commitment to his chaver, Clinton told him, no, that deal was with Yitzhak Rabin. I want you to release some prisoners as a good faith gesture to the Palestinians. These are terrorists with blood on their hands. And he said quite, clearly, they're blowing up buses in Jerusalem right now. If I release any of them, it'll be political suicide. And Clinton just said, well, that's your problem. But I could have come home by way of Yitzhak Rabin's efforts on my behalf. If Clinton had been a decent, honorable man, I would have come home earlier.
Like I said, he promised me that when I interviewed him before he became president, when he was president-elect, he would try to do something about you. He didn't live up to that expectation either.
No,
so,
not at all. Not at all.
So,
look, my attitude is any man that cheats on his wife, as he did, simply can't be trusted at all.
Wow.
Marriage fidelity is actually one of the most important virtues a husband can exhibit. It's not like a relationship between a parent and a child. That's natural. But a relationship between a husband and wife is, well, it's artificial, and it has to be worked on, and it's based on trust and loyalty.
We have about a moment left. When are you going to be announcing when you're running for the Knesset? When's that coming?
Well, depending on what happens with this deal with Hamas, it could come pretty fast. We'll see. We'll see. It just depends on when the next election is. That's all.
Jonathan, I want to thank you for joining. We've never had you on. We got to have you back more often. Are you doing a daily podcast or a weekly podcast?
It's a weekly podcast, and I'll be doing several more right now. And
good.
Yeah. So.
Well, but we look forward to having you back. And you went through quite a bit being a Jew and committed to Jewish. And again, I had the pleasure of interviewing your father, your mother, your first wife, Ann, your second wife, Esther, having you on. We're going to have you back. But thank you for being part of our show and keep up being so strong for Israel. And thank you. Jonathan Pollard, the former spy for Israel, speaking to him. Be well. Speaking to him in